My first job wasn't glamorous. In fact, it wasn't even supposed to be scary. Holloway Printing was an old factory on the south side of town. Brick walls stained black from decades of smoke, broken windows patched with cardboard, and a constant low hum from the machines inside. I was 20 and broke, so when they offered me the graveyard shift as a machine assistant, I said yes before they could change their minds. Nights quiet, my supervisor Donna told me on my first day. Just keep the presses running, fix any paper jams, and if you hear knocking, ignore it. I thought she was joking. The first few nights were fine. The place smelled of ink and hot metal, the kind of scent that clung to your clothes no matter how many times you washed them. The huge printing presses filled the space with a rhythmic thump, thump, thump that almost felt like a heartbeat. I liked the solitude, until that Wednesday. It was around 2:30 a.m. when I heard it. Not the usual machine noise, but a faint tapping, like knuckles against metal. Tap, tap, tap. I followed the sound down the main aisle, weaving between the presses. The air felt colder the further I went. At the very end of the row, I stopped. The tapping was coming from one of the paper storage rooms, a narrow door I'd never seen open before. When I pushed it, the hinges groaned. Inside, it was pitch dark, except for a strip of dim light seeping from beneath a stack of paper rolls. "Hello?" I called. The tapping stopped. I stepped closer, shining my flashlight at the gap. That's when I saw fingers, pale, bony fingers, curling slowly around the edge of the paper roll. They were too long, too thin. I backed up so fast I tripped over a stack of boxes. The paper rolls didn't move, but something whispered my name from behind them. My full name. I slammed the door shut and ran back to the control station, heart hammering. For the rest of the shift, I kept my eyes on the machines, refusing to look toward that room. When Donna came in at 6 a.m., I told her what happened. She just stared at me for a long moment and said, "That room was sealed 5 years ago. The man who worked in there, we never found him. But sometimes, the presses still print his name on the test sheets." I laughed nervously, thinking she was messing with me, until she handed me the morning's print stack. On the top page, in perfect black ink, was my full name. Over and over. I didn't go back for my next shift. It was my third week working at Halbert & Co., a law firm tucked away in a steel and glass tower that looked harmless enough from the outside. By day, the office was a parade of shuffling papers, clicking keyboards, and the occasional hum of the copy machine. But after 9 p.m., when most people had gone home, the place felt wrong. The fluorescent lights seemed too bright yet too cold, buzzing faintly like they were struggling to stay alive. Shadows stretched unnaturally long across the cubicles, bending in ways that didn't match the light's direction. I wasn't supposed to be there late, but that night I had to finish compiling a client's file, one that had mysteriously reappeared on my desk after I'd already sent it to archives. The folder was thick, heavy with decades-old papers yellowed at the edges, and on the cover in faded ink was written, "Property Dispute, 1978. Do not reopen." The more I read, the stranger it became. The case involved a man who had vanished during the trial, his absence never explained. But the witness statements were impossible. One claimed the man was seen standing in courtroom 4B after his disappearance, staring through the glass doors at his own funeral. Another described hearing him whisper inside the ventilation system, his voice echoing through the building long after the case closed. The deeper I dug, the colder the air around me became, as though someone had opened a freezer behind my chair. At first, I brushed it off as office AC, but then I noticed my coffee's steam drifting sideways, toward the empty cubicle of desk 47. No one had sat there since I joined. HR told me it was in renovation, though the chair was always neatly pushed in and the computer still plugged into the wall. I thought I saw a figure sitting there for a moment, hunched over, typing without making a sound. But when I blinked, the chair was empty. Then came the whisper, low, breathy, right by my ear. "You're not supposed to see this." I spun around, but the office was still and silent. My skin crawled as the file's pages began to rustle on their own, turning slowly, as if invisible fingers were leafing through them. The overhead lights flickered, and in that stutter of darkness I saw him, a pale man in a suit that looked waterlogged, standing by desk 47 with eyes like fogged glass. His lips didn't move, but I could feel words pressing into my mind. Put it back. The next blink, he was gone, but the scent of damp earth and rotting paper lingered in the air. My hands shook as I gathered the file, shoved it into my bag, and bolted for the elevator. As the doors slid shut, I saw desk 47 reflected in the metal panels. Occupied now, the pale man's head slowly turning to face me. I didn't sleep that night. The file is still in my apartment, locked in the bottom drawer. Sometimes, when my building is quiet and I'm sure I'm alone, I hear typing from my living room. I had only been working at Grayford Accounting for 2 weeks when I first noticed it. The faint, almost imperceptible flicker of the overhead light in room 407. The office was a sprawling, dimly lit maze of cubicles and paper-strewn desks, but room 407 stood apart. It was always colder there, as if the air conditioning vent above had been cranked to full blast, even in the middle of winter. My desk sat just outside its half-closed door, so I could hear everything inside. The soft hum of the fluorescent lamp, the slow creak of the chair as if someone invisible shifted their weight, and the occasional rustle of papers, though the room was supposed to be empty. The strange thing was, no one else seemed to acknowledge room 407. When I asked Lydia from HR who used to sit there, her face tensed, and she muttered, "We don't use that room anymore." She offered nothing more, and I didn't push. At least not then. But curiosity has teeth, and it bit into me every time I caught that flicker through the narrow opening in the door. Late one night, I stayed past 11 p.m., buried in end-of-month reports. The office had emptied out hours earlier, and the silence was suffocating. That's when I heard it. The rhythmic tapping of keys. Slow, deliberate, and coming from room 407. My skin prickled. I rose from my chair and approached the door, my footsteps muted on the thin carpet. The sound stopped abruptly as I reached the threshold. I hesitated, then pushed the door fully open. The stale, cold air hit me first, carrying the faint scent of something metallic, like rust or blood. In the far corner, the ancient desktop computer sat humming, its monitor casting a pale green glow across the desk. On the screen was a spreadsheet filled with names and dates, some going back decades. My stomach knotted as I noticed the last entry had today's date, and my name typed neatly beside it. The light above buzzed and flickered violently, and then, for a fraction of a second, I saw her. A woman in a faded gray suit, her hair wet and hanging in clumps, water dripping from her open mouth as she stared directly at me. Her eyes were clouded, skin pale as paper, and yet her fingers kept typing on the keyboard, even though the keys made no sound. I stumbled back, my breath catching in my throat. The light went out completely, plunging room 407 into darkness. When I returned the next morning, the door was locked. Lydia pretended not to hear me when I asked about it, but every so often when I work late, I catch that faint flicker under the door. And I know she's still in there, typing more names into her list. I don't know what happens when she finishes the page, but my name is still there, waiting.